Hello world, it's Bob, and this is the Orient Express. A quick, fun way to orient someone to the delights of cuddling. Copyright thejoyofcuddling.com. And this deck of 3x5 cards is one of the things that I've created as a way to communicate to people some of the parameters of cuddling, some of the options that are available to them, some of the, just the thinking that I have about it in terms of relationship, my perspective as a professional and what I bring to cuddling. And this morning I had a time to reflect on some of the issues and circumstances with one of the clients that I have. And it comes around the idea of restating or perhaps reframing the boundaries that we have in our cuddling sessions, and what would be an effective way to do that. So for me, many times what I do is I take those kinds of things into my spiritual practice in the morning. It gives me an opportunity to reflect on them and to listen, to allow my thoughts to be formed and shaped by the insights or the inspiration that I get during that. And one of the things that I came up with was I just had this mental image of a grid, or not a grid, but a little illustration that had 4 segments to it. And I'll put it up here. Maybe the camera will adjust. Yeah. So, before, at first, most recent, and tomorrow. And the idea is that in the before quadrant would be the things that I brought to the cuddling relationship before I met that person and before I cuddled with them for the first time. So in other words, my history around touch, my history around relationships, my history around communication and boundaries, and then also I can imagine a separate 4 quadrant for them. What they brought to the session and what they brought to cuddling and what they brought to the experience that we've had. And then the next quadrant is the at first quadrant. So at first, so the before is before we met. At first is, okay, when we began to consider engaging in cuddling together, what did we think or expect or want at first when we first came to that first session? And then in this case, for this person, we've cuddled several times, and the most recent one is the next quadrant. What's the most recent cuddling experience that prompted me to evaluate and to reconsider, my position and my thinking and things like that? And then after that, the 4th quadrant is for tomorrow, symbolizing tomorrow. Okay, so we've had the most recent one. What would be the next one be like? And tomorrow also in a larger sense of what would the future hold for us with cuddling. And as I think about that, I really like the idea of all 4 of those quadrants for different reasons. The before quadrant, I think it's a helpful and useful way to acknowledge that I and each person that I cuddle with has a significant history, from birth up into adulthood, of touch. What it meant to them, what their hopes were, what their satisfactions and dissatisfactions were along the way. And all of that is a part of, internally what they bring, and intellectually and emotionally and relationally what they bring to that cuddling session. And their background is uniquely different than mine. And part of it is, I think, at this point for sort of the reevaluation, is to go back and maybe state some of those things that maybe I'm bringing into the current relationship with cuddling, and to just shed maybe some light on them, to touch on those things and talk about them briefly, or maybe in detail as the conversation goes. And then also the at first quadrant is, based on where I am in my life and my age and my stage along my journey, what did I bring to that initial? What were my hopes and expectations there? And for the client is, what were they hoping to get out of it? What were they hoping to perhaps get out of that first session, and what were they hoping to get out of the subsequent sessions? So taken together as a unit, what were they hoping to get out of, cuddling as a whole, an experience for them? Because I think, one of the things that cuddling does is not only the experiences that actually take place during the sessions, but it's also what can I take from cuddling as an experience out into my real life or into my non-cuddling interactions with others. In terms of communication, in terms of what I want, what I don't want. I'm a yes to this, I'm a no to that. I'm a no to that, but how about this? Offering an alternative explicitly, verbally, so the other person can consent or not consent, and we can try to find common ground there. That those at first expectations may have been met, or maybe there were certain things that over time have come out, one time or repeatedly during the cuddling engagements, and that it may reveal, hey, maybe there was more that I was looking for that maybe I didn't even realize, but now after a certain sequence, I'm now aware of that, and it's become more conscious to me, maybe something that I can now express verbally. And then in terms of the most recent, okay, taking a look at the last session and seeing it as a standalone session, maybe also seeing it as sort of a data point along the progression from the beginning until then, and maybe those points can be, sort of graphed, and maybe there's a certain direction that it's going in, and to see the significance of that. One of the things I like is sort of a three-part way of looking at things, which is, say, observation is what I see, interpretation is what does it mean, and application is, okay, now based on those first two, what do I do? Either what do I do more of or what do I do less of? And then in terms of tomorrow, I think part of that is also taking the time to reflect and have sort of a check-in and to talk about, okay, this was the history, this was the first, this is the most recent, this is the direction, and then what does tomorrow look like? And what are some things that we can talk about that we are both a yes to? What are some things, well, I'm a no to that, but I'm a yes to this? And to go back and forth explicitly to say, hey, is this something that, with these changes that we consent to, that we can see it bearing additional fruit going forward? And I think that the idea of periodic check-ins with clients is something that I'm going to do one later today, which would be the first time doing that. But I also see it as something that I may want to intentionally incorporate into the practice, maybe explicitly at the beginning to say, you know what, why don't we have a couple sessions and then have a check-in to talk about that. So part of the option, with cuddling is to do, engagements or sessions in a public place. So meeting in a public place for coffee where we can talk, and we can use touch maybe to punctuate the conversation in terms of emphasizing or de-emphasizing certain points. Also the idea of body language and being seen and being heard face-to-face in person as a part of the communication exercise and clarity that can come out of cuddling, and having a relationship with a professional cuddler who is skilled and desires to communicate that way. Because part of it also, I think, one of the maybe unseen, but one of the tangible advantages of cuddling with a professional is the idea that they can sort of be a canvas or a sounding board by being non-judgmental, by being non-sexual and non-relational, and being transactional, in a financial container, for a way for that person to come to that kind of a other person and for allow their true self to emerge without any sort of fear of judgment or rejection or acceptance, that they can be who they truly are. And sometimes I think that's a great way to get to know themselves better, is by coming to a situation like that. So those are my thoughts. If you'd like to comment, you can comment below, or in the About section. You can also comment there, or as I say, you can connect there. There's different options you can use to Kik if you want to contact me anonymously. The Kik address is in there, which is Bob, TJOC, which stands for Bob, The Joy of Cuddling. Also, my email address is in there, and the website, thejoyofcuddling.com, is another way you can get more information, interact with the different things that I've put out there publicly on social media, to comment, to respond to, and also to initiate a conversation if you'd like to, to talk more, to develop a cuddling relationship. Another thing that I've started to offer are phone sessions, which are being able to touch verbally, to be able to touch in a way where a person can relate safely with actually complete certainty that there's no physical touch as an option because we're doing it over the phone. But to me, that may be another way for people to get comfortable and get to the point where they've talked enough where they say, you know what, I want to go to the next step, and now I want to actually physically be, in my presence and me in their presence, where physical touch is an option. But also to acknowledge that, the screening of, one phone call may not be enough, and to make myself available for that. And that's another service that I offer, for a fee. Okay? All right. Have a great day. Bye-bye.